To the world, he was Mr. Miyagi, the wise, soft-spoken karate master who taught generations about balance, patience, and honor. But behind that calm smile and timeless wisdom, the man who played him, Pat Morita, carried a lifetime of pain that most never saw. His story wasn't one of overnight fame or easy success. It was one of sickness, loss, rejection, and quiet resilience, a story that reveals how much darkness he endured before he ever stood in front of the camera with Daniel LaRusso. Noriyuki Pat Morita was born on June 28, 1932, in Alton, California, to Japanese immigrant parents who worked long, grueling hours as farmers. His childhood began with pain and almost ended there. At just 2 years old, Pat was diagnosed with spinal tuberculosis, a rare and devastating condition at the time. He spent nearly 9 years in hospitals, wrapped in full-body casts, often confined to an iron frame that prevented him from moving. Doctors told his parents he might never walk again. For a little boy who could only stare out a hospital window while other children played outside, hope was a fragile thing. But somehow, Pat did learn to walk again. By age 11, he took his first steps out of the hospital and into a world that had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined. It was 1943, World War II had engulfed America in fear, and Japanese families across the country were being sent to internment camps. The Morita family, loyal U.S. citizens, were forced from their home and imprisoned at the Gila River Relocation Center in Arizona. Pat's first taste of freedom after nearly a decade in a hospital bed led straight into barbed wire. He later said that the irony of it haunted him forever. "I went from being a prisoner of my body," he once reflected, "to being a prisoner of my country." Inside the camp, he tried to make sense of the injustice. His parents worked in the mess hall, his father sometimes making jokes to keep morale up. Pat began to imitate him, learning that humor could dull pain, that laughter was a way to survive. After the war ended, the Moritas started over, poor but determined. They opened a small restaurant in Sacramento called Ariake Chop Suey House, where Pat worked long hours washing dishes and waiting tables. Customers mispronounced his name so often that he began calling himself Pat, after his doctor, Patrick, who had treated him as a child. It stuck, but while he smiled through his work, he dreamed of something else, the stage. He loved how laughter could change a room, and he wanted to chase that power. Yet being Japanese American in the 1950s meant roles were rare and prejudice ran deep. So he found another way in stand-up comedy. Inspired by entertainers like Red Fox and Don Rickles, Pat began performing at small clubs under the name The Hip Nip, a bold choice that blended humor with quiet defiance. "If they're gonna laugh at me," he once said, "I'd rather it be on my terms." His timing was impeccable, his delivery natural. Still, it was a hard road. He struggled to make money, faced racism constantly, and sometimes performed for audiences who heckled him just for being Asian. But he kept going. Comedy gave him identity when the world kept trying to take it away. By the late 1960s, he caught the attention of television producers and began landing small roles on shows like The Bill Dana Show and The Odd Couple. Then came his first big break, Happy Days. As Arnold, the wisecracking diner owner, Pat Morita became a familiar face in American living rooms. He was funny, warm, and unpredictable. But even as his career began to bloom, his personal life was falling apart. Years of poverty and insecurity had left scars he couldn't shake. He drank to calm his anxiety before performances, and over time, alcohol became his silent companion. When The Karate Kid came along in 1983, Morita almost didn't get the part. The studio didn't want a comedian. They wanted someone serious, stoic, someone more like Toshiro Mifune, the Japanese screen legend. Director John G. Avildsen liked Morita, but the producers thought he was too funny and not Japanese enough. Morita fought for the role anyway. He grew out his hair, spoke in a softer accent, and auditioned again. When he performed the wax on, wax off scene, everyone in the room went silent. Ralph Macchio, who had played Daniel LaRusso, later said, "You could feel it. He was Miyagi." The film became an instant classic, and Morita's life changed overnight. His performance earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor in 1985, the first for an Asian American male in nearly half a century. Suddenly, the world saw him as a symbol of wisdom and discipline, the mentor everyone wished they had. But the man behind that image was still fighting private demons. Fame didn't heal the years of pain or rejection. Behind closed doors, Morita battled with alcoholism that often threatened his career and relationships. He divorced his first wife, Kathleen, and later married twice more, but stability eluded him. Those who knew him said he was generous and deeply kind, but also haunted, especially when he drank. His friends described moments when he'd fall silent for hours, lost in memories of his childhood hospital years or the internment camp. In interviews, he sometimes spoke about the irony of being seen as a cultural hero when he still felt invisible inside. "People think I'm Miyagi," he once said. But Miyagi is who I wish I was. By the 1990s, his fame had faded, though he continued acting in smaller films and television roles. He made guest appearances, voiced animated characters, and did commercials, but his health began to decline. Alcoholism took its toll on his liver, his relationships, and his spirit. Still, he never stopped working. He joked that he didn't know how to quit performing because performing was the only thing that ever made him feel free. For many, Pat Morita was a beacon, proof that talent and kindness could transcend stereotypes. But to those closest to him, he was also a man trying to find peace with a past full of pain. He would spend his final years searching for that peace, quietly battling illness and loneliness far away from Hollywood's spotlight. And when the end came, it revealed just how fragile and unguarded he really was. As Pat Morita entered the final chapters of his life, the contrast between the world's perception of him and the reality he lived behind closed doors became more striking. To the public, he was Mr. Miyagi, the quiet, wise mentor whose patience and humility changed the lives of millions. But in truth, Morita was a man haunted by pain, loss, and a lifelong struggle to reconcile fame with the emptiness that often comes when the cameras stop rolling. In the early 1990s, Morita's career had slowed down. Though the Karate Kid franchise had made him a household name, Hollywood wasn't kind to aging Asian American actors. Roles were scarce, and when they came, they were often small caricatures, a far cry from the depth he brought to Miyagi. "I'm grateful for Miyagi," he said in a 1994 interview. "But sometimes I feel trapped inside him." Behind the smile and calm demeanor that defined him, Morita was fighting old demons. His health had been fragile since childhood. He had contracted spinal tuberculosis at age 2 and spent nearly a decade in hospitals. That experience had made him resilient, but it also left scars. After his recovery, he was confined to an internment camp during World War II along with his Japanese-American family. These traumas shaped him profoundly. Though he rarely spoke of them publicly, close friends said they fueled his dark sense of humor and his quiet pain. By the mid-1990s, Morita began struggling with alcoholism. He had faced bouts of drinking earlier in life, but as work dwindled and fame faded, the addiction deepened. His third wife, Evelyn, later revealed that alcohol had slowly consumed him. He would drink to ease the loneliness. He wanted to be strong, but sometimes he just couldn't. Those who knew him described a man who never lost his kindness, but whose light had dimmed under the weight of personal regret and declining health. Yet Morita continued to work, even when his body could barely keep up. He appeared in small films and TV guest spots, doing voice work and comedy appearances. He often joked about being the most famous Asian guy you don't remember, masking his disappointment with humor. Hollywood's ageism and racism limited his opportunities, but he refused to retire completely. Acting, he said, was the only thing that made him feel alive. His relationship with his family was complex. He had 3 daughters from his first 2 marriages, and though he loved them deeply, his long absences and struggles with drinking strained those bonds. Dad was always chasing something, one daughter said in a later interview. Maybe peace. Maybe forgiveness. In 2005, Morita's health took a turn for the worse. Years of drinking had ravaged his liver, and he was often hospitalized. Friends said he had periods of clarity when he wanted to get better. He talked about doing another Miyagi-style role, something to remind the world of his depth. But time was running out. He passed away on November 24, 2005, at his home in Las Vegas, aged 73. The cause was kidney failure linked to his alcoholism. News of his death shocked Hollywood. For many, Pat Morita was Mr. Miyagi, immortal, untouchable, the wise teacher whose words lived on in generations of viewers. Ralph Macchio, his Karate Kid co-star, delivered a heartfelt tribute, calling him a man of deep soul and immense talent. But behind the tributes was the sorrow of knowing how much Morita had suffered in silence. After his death, Evelyn Morita spoke candidly about his last years. She revealed how he had been quietly struggling to find his place after fame faded. He gave so much to everyone else, but he didn't know how to give to himself, she said. His drinking, she added, was never about rebellion or ego. It was about numbing pain. In 2013, a documentary titled Pat Morita, Long Story Short, was released, shedding light on his life. It portrayed him as a complex, brilliant man, a pioneer for Asian American actors who broke barriers in Hollywood but paid a heavy price for it. It showed rare footage of Morita performing stand-up comedy and his infectious laughter that could light up a room. Yet it also revealed the heartbreak of a man who often felt invisible outside of one iconic role. Morita's legacy, however, remains powerful. He was one of the first Japanese-American actors to earn an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor for his role in The Karate Kid, 1984. His performance transcended stereotypes, giving emotional depth to a character that became a symbol of mentorship, honor, and quiet strength. Even today, quotes like, "wax on, wax off," and "no such thing as bad student, only bad teacher" continue to resonate across generations. What truly breaks the heart is knowing that Morita's wisdom, humor, and humility were born from so much suffering. He had endured disease, discrimination, and addiction, yet what the world remembers most is his ability to teach peace. Behind that calm voice was a man who never stopped fighting for his own. In his final years, Morita often spoke about his hope to be remembered not just as Mr. Miyagi, but as a storyteller who brought humanity to every role. He once said in an interview, "If I can make people feel something, laugh, cry, or just think, then maybe I've done my job." And he did. Pat Morita's story is not just one of tragedy, but of triumph through pain. He opened doors for Asian American actors at a time when few existed in Hollywood. His legacy lives not only in his performances, but in every underdog who believes they can rise above their limitations. In the end, the man who taught millions about balance spent his life searching for himself. And though his struggles broke him, his spirit endures in every student who learns to wax on and wax off, in every viewer who sees wisdom behind gentle eyes, and in every soul who finds hope in a story. Pat Morita's journey was not perfect, but it was real, full of laughter, heartbreak, and quiet courage. What really happened to him reminds us that even the strongest teachers sometimes carry the heaviest lessons.